Have you ever faced a challenge that seemed impossible to overcome? A moment when everything seemed too big, too powerful, and you felt too small? In modern life, we often face our own Goliaths. It might be overwhelming work pressure, a frightening medical diagnosis, or a broken relationship that seems beyond repair. But today, I want to share with you an ancient story that remains timeless, the story of how a shepherd boy defeated a giant warrior with just 5 stones and a sling. This isn't just a story about overcoming adversity, it's a profound lesson about faith, courage, and finding strength in the most unexpected places. Let's travel back about 3,000 years to the Valley of Elah. This is where 2 armies faced each other in an uneven battle. On one side were the Philistines, powerful warriors equipped with the most advanced weapons of their time. On the other side were the Israelites, a people trying to protect their land, but trembling before the enemy's might. Tension filled the air as Goliath, a Philistine giant warrior standing about 9 feet tall, stepped into the middle of the valley each day. His voice echoed throughout the valley, challenging any Israelite to face him in one-on-one combat. The winner would determine the fate of both nations. "Choose one of your men to come down and face me," Goliath roared, his voice like thunder. "If he can defeat me, we will become your slaves. But if I win, you will become our slaves." Every day, for 40 days, this challenge rang out. And every day, not a single Israeli soldier dared to step forward. Even King Saul, the tallest and strongest among the Israelites, trembled at Goliath's presence. Fear spread through the Israeli army like a contagious disease, paralyzing their will to fight. This wasn't just a physical battle, it was a psychological one. Goliath didn't rely solely on his strength, he used fear as a weapon. Each day that passed without anyone answering his challenge, the Israelites' morale sank lower. They began to believe they couldn't win. Have you ever felt like that? When a challenge repeats itself day after day, and you begin to believe you can't overcome it. When fear becomes so great that it paralyzes your ability to act. But then, on a fateful day, someone unexpected appeared on the battlefield. Not a seasoned warrior, not a trained soldier, but a shepherd boy. His name was David, Jesse's youngest son, sent by his father to check on his brothers serving in the army. When David arrived and witnessed the scene before him, he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Not because Goliath was so large, but because no one in the Israeli army dared to face him. While everyone else cowered in fear, David saw something different, an opportunity to prove the power of faith. This was the defining moment, when a shepherd boy with unwavering faith stepped into history. And what happened next would not only change the fate of 2 nations, but would also become a timeless lesson about facing seemingly insurmountable challenges in life. Let's explore together this extraordinary story, the story of how David defeated Goliath with 5 stones and a sling. Because in this story we'll find valuable lessons we can apply to our own lives, to face the Goliaths that challenge us every day. Imagine a man nearly 10 feet tall standing before you, his bronze armor gleaming in the sunlight, his bronze helmet covering his head, and a spear as heavy as a weaver's beam. His laughter echoes throughout the valley, and each step seems to shake the ground. This is Goliath, the Philistine warrior, the embodiment of fear and threat. Goliath wasn't just an ordinary warrior. According to ancient records, he stood about 9 feet tall, a gigantic height, even by modern standards. Just imagine. He was nearly 3 feet taller than the tallest basketball player in the world today. His armor weighed about 125 pounds, and just the tip of his spear weighed 15 pounds, much heavier than a typical dumbbell at your local gym. But Goliath's physical strength was only part of his weaponry. His real weapon was the fear he spread. Every morning and evening, for 40 days, Goliath would step into the middle of the Valley of Elah. His mocking laughter echoed across the hills, challenging any Israelite who dared to face him. "Why do you come out to draw up in battle formation?" Goliath roared. "Am I not the Philistine, and are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man for yourselves and let him come down to me. If he is able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us." Each time Goliath appeared, the Israelite army trembled. Even King Saul, said to be the tallest among the Israelites, didn't dare to face this giant. Fear spread like a contagious disease, paralyzing the fighting spirit of the entire army. This was a sophisticated psychological tactic, Goliath knew that his presence, his voice, and his daily challenge would gradually destroy the morale of his opponents. Each day that passed without anyone answering his challenge, the Israelites' belief in their ability to win diminished further. They began to accept defeat before the battle had even begun. Can you see this in modern life? Our Goliaths may not be 9 feet tall or wear bronze armor, but they are no less intimidating. Perhaps it's a frightening medical diagnosis when the doctor says cancer or terminal illness, and you feel as if the ground beneath your feet is collapsing. Maybe it's a financial crisis, when debts pile up and you see no way out. Or perhaps it's the pain of a broken relationship, the betrayal of someone you trusted, or workplace pressure that seems insurmountable. Like Goliath, these modern challenges often use fear as their primary weapon. They stand before us each day, challenging us, making us tremble, and causing us to feel powerless. They want us to believe they are too big, too powerful to defeat. But there's a profound lesson here. Goliath is only frightening when we view him through the lens of fear. When we only see his height, his strength, and his weapons, we've lost before we've begun. This is exactly what the Israelite army did. They only saw an unbeatable giant. But as we'll see, there is another way of looking. There is another approach to the Goliaths in our lives, and that's where David enters the story. Before we continue to the next part about David, take a moment and ask yourself, what Goliath is standing before you today? What challenge seems too large, too powerful, too frightening to confront? And more importantly, through which lens are you viewing it? The lens of fear or the lens of faith? Because as we'll see in David's story, sometimes the most frightening giants fall to the simplest weapons. Sometimes the greatest challenges are overcome by those the world considers the smallest. And sometimes it's our faith, not our strength, that determines victory. While the entire Israelite army trembled before Goliath, an unexpected figure appeared on the battlefield. Not a seasoned warrior, not a high-ranking officer, but a shepherd boy, the one whom God had chosen to accomplish the extraordinary. David, Jesse's youngest son, was born and raised in an ordinary family in Bethlehem. His position in the family had shaped his character, the youngest child, often overlooked, assigned to tend the sheep while his older brothers served in King Saul's army. But it was in those desolate pastures that David developed skills and qualities that no one in his family recognized. On that fateful day, Jesse called David and said, "Take this food to your brothers in the army and see how they are doing." A simple task, a minor errand that any youngest son might be given. But this was how God brought David to the right place at the right time, evidence that nothing happens by chance in God's plan. When David arrived at the camp, he witnessed an astonishing scene. Goliath, the Philistine giant, was standing in the middle of the valley, challenging the Israelite army as he had done every day. But instead of seeing a brave army ready to fight, David only saw soldiers cowering in fear, hiding. "Who is this man who dares to challenge the armies of the living God?" David asked, surprise evident on his face. For him, this wasn't just a battle between two armies, it was a matter of God's honor. How could a pagan stand there and challenge God's chosen people without being punished? David's reaction wasn't the arrogance of youth, but an expression of deep faith. While everyone else looked at Goliath and saw an insurmountable threat, David saw an enemy of God, an enemy whom God would defeat. This was the fundamental difference in how challenges are viewed, through the lens of fear or through the lens of faith. When the soldiers heard David's words, they quickly reported to King Saul. And when David stood before the king, he spoke words that would go down in history. "Let no one lose heart because of this Philistine. I will go and fight him." One can imagine the surprise on Saul's face when he heard these words from a shepherd boy. "You cannot fight this Philistine." Saul said, "You are only a boy, and he has been a warrior since his youth." But David's response revealed something profound about his character and faith. Instead of retreating in the face of doubt, David told of battles he had fought, not on battlefields, but in desolate pastures. "When I am tending my father's sheep," David explained, "if a lion or bear comes and carries off a sheep from the flock, I go after it, strike it, and rescue the sheep from its mouth. If it turns on me, I seize it by its hair, strike it, and kill it. I have killed both lions and bears, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God." In David's account, we see confidence not born of pride, but of experience with God. David didn't say, "I am strong," or "I am good at fighting." Instead, he said, The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. This is an important lesson for all of us. Past challenges aren't just to make us stronger, they're also to prepare us for future Goliaths. Each small victory builds faith for greater challenges. But not everyone understood this. When Eliab, David's oldest brother, heard his younger brother talking about facing Goliath, he became angry. "Why have you come down here? And with whom did you leave those few sheep in the wilderness? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle." Eliab's criticism reflects a common reality. Sometimes those closest to us are the ones who find it hardest to recognize our potential and mission. They still see us through the lens of the past, unable to see what God is doing in us. But David didn't let criticism discourage him. He didn't argue with his brother or try to prove himself right. Instead, he continued to focus on the task at hand. This is a valuable lesson about dealing with criticism. Sometimes, the best response isn't words, but action. Finally, King Saul was convinced by David's strong faith. "Go," he said, "and may the Lord be with you." But Saul still tried to help David in the way he understood. He gave David his own armor, a spear and a sword. David put on the armor, but quickly realized it didn't fit him. "I cannot go in these," he said, "because I am not used to them." And then in a deeply meaningful act, David took off Saul's armor. This wasn't just a practical matter, it was a profound statement of faith. David understood that he couldn't fight with someone else's weapons or rely on human strength. He had to be true to himself and to how God had prepared him. Instead of armor and sword, David chose familiar tools, his shepherd's staff and his sling. He went down to the stream and chose 5 smooth stones, putting them in his shepherd's bag. 5 stones, no more, no less. David didn't need an arsenal, he just needed the right tools and faith in God. When David approached Goliath, he carried not just 5 stones and a sling, he carried faith in one greater than any challenge. And that's why, to everyone's surprise, a shepherd boy was chosen to face the giant. In your life, you may feel like David, the unlikely one, the one without an impressive appearance, the one the world might overlook. But remember, God doesn't look at outward appearance, he looks at the heart. And sometimes those the world considers the smallest are the ones God chooses to accomplish the greatest things. When David stood before King Saul declaring he would face Goliath, no one believed a shepherd boy could win. But what they didn't know was that David had been prepared for this moment long before, not in military training schools, but in desolate pastures, where he had learned valuable lessons about courage and faith. "When I was tending my father's sheep," David explained to King Saul, "there were times when lions and bears came to take sheep from the flock. I chased after them, struck them, and rescued the sheep from their mouths. When they turned to attack me, I grabbed them by their hair, struck them, and killed them." Imagine that scene, a boy alone facing the fiercest wild animals. No audience, no cheering crowds, no glory. Just David, his flock, and the threat before him. What did David learn in those moments? He learned that fear could be overcome. He learned that with God's help, he was stronger than his outward appearance suggested. And most importantly, he learned that each victory builds the foundation for the next one. This is a profound lesson for all of us. The daily challenges, the small battles we face, aren't just about survival. They are preparation for future Goliaths. Each time you stand firm against a fear, each time you choose to do the right thing when no one is watching, you are being prepared for greater challenges ahead. But David's story doesn't end there. When King Saul was finally convinced by David's courage, he tried to help in the way he understood. He offered David his own armor. "Wear my armor," Saul said, "and take my sword. They will protect you." David, with respect, tried on the armor, but after a few steps he realized he couldn't move naturally. The armor was too heavy, too cumbersome, and completely unsuitable for him. "I cannot fight with these," David said, "because I am not used to them." And then, in a deeply meaningful act, David took off Saul's armor. This moment contains a valuable lesson. Sometimes even those with the best intentions try to impose their armor on us, their methods, their experiences, their approaches. But God has prepared each of us in unique ways. What matters isn't using someone else's weapons, but being faithful to how God has equipped us. David understood that his strength wasn't in armor or sword, but in his faith in God and the skills he had developed during his years as a shepherd. He knew he couldn't defeat Goliath by trying to become a conventional warrior. He had to be true to himself. Instead of armor and sword, David chose familiar tools, his shepherd's staff and his sling. This wasn't a choice of weakness, it was a choice of wisdom. David knew that with these tools under God's guidance, he had defeated lions and bears. And with those same tools, he would face Goliath. He went down to the stream and chose 5 smooth stones, putting them in his shepherd's bag. 5 stones, no more, no less. Each stone was carefully selected, smooth and balanced, perfect for his sling. David didn't need an arsenal, he just needed the right tools and faith in God. There's something profound about David choosing 5 stones. Why 5? Perhaps he wanted to be prepared in case the first one missed its target. Or perhaps, as some scholars have suggested, the 5 stones symbolize David's 5 brothers, a reminder that he was fighting not just for himself, but for his family and his people. But perhaps the most important lesson here is about careful preparation. David didn't rush into battle, he prepared carefully. He knew that faith doesn't exclude preparation. In fact, true faith motivates us to prepare as best we can, trusting that God will use our efforts. When David approached Goliath, he carried not just 5 stones and a sling. He carried years of experience in the wilderness, lessons from protecting his flock, and above all, faith in one greater than any challenge. In your life, what are your 5 stones? They might be skills you've developed, lessons you've learned through trials, unique gifts and talents God has given you. Don't underestimate them. Don't think you need to become someone else to face the Goliaths in your life. Instead, recognize that God has prepared you in His own way. Every challenge you've overcome, every skill you've developed, every lesson you've learned, all are part of His plan to prepare you for your own Goliath moment. And when that moment comes, don't try to wear Saul's armor. Be true to who you are, to how God has equipped you. Choose your 5 stones, your unique strengths, skills and talents, and move forward with faith that God will use them to bring victory. Because ultimately, victory doesn't depend on our strength, but on God's strength working through us. And with Him beside us, no Goliath is too big to defeat. The sun shone down on the valley of Elah, its light reflecting off Goliath's bronze armor as he stepped out between the 2 armies. Like every day for the past 40 days, his mocking laughter echoed throughout the valley. But today would be different. Today, a shepherd boy was approaching him, staff in hand, a small leather pouch containing 5 stones hanging from his belt. When Goliath saw David, his first reaction wasn't fear but deep offense. He, a legendary warrior, was sent to face a child. This wasn't just a battle, it was an insult. "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" Goliath roared, his voice reverberating across the valley. "Come here, and I'll give your flesh to the birds of the air and the beasts of the field." Goliath's curses and threats were aimed not just at David but at the God of Israel. This was the psychological tactic he had successfully used for 40 days, sowing fear and weakening the opponent's spirit. But this time, he was facing a different kind of opponent. Instead of cowering before the threats, David stood tall, his gaze steady. He didn't look at Goliath through the lens of fear like others. He viewed him through the lens of faith. And from that perspective, Goliath wasn't an unbeatable giant. He was just an enemy of God, one who would soon fall. "You come against me with sword, spear, and javelin," David said, his voice echoing with confidence, born of deep faith. "But I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. I'll give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel." This wasn't a statement of pride. It was a declaration of absolute faith. David wasn't just talking about his own victory. He was speaking of God's victory. He understood that this battle wasn't just between him and Goliath. It was between the God of Israel and the gods of the Philistines. As David advanced, he didn't run with fear but walked with determination. Each step was sure, each movement purposeful. He knew he wasn't alone in this battle. God was with him, fighting alongside him. Goliath, with all his strength and weapons, began moving toward David. But before he could get close, David acted. He quickly took a stone from his bag, placed it in his sling, and whirled it around his head with speed and precision honed through years of protecting his flock from predators. The stone flew, a perfect arc through the air, and struck Goliath's forehead. the only vulnerable spot in his armor. The sound of the stone hitting the skull echoed in the still air, and then, like a great tree being felled, Goliath fell, face down on the ground. In that moment, time seemed to stand still. Both armies stood in silence, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. Goliath, the invincible warrior, had fallen to a boy with a stone. David wasted no time. He ran to Goliath, drew the giant's own sword from its sheath, and cut off his head, fulfilling his promise and proving that the victory was complete. When the Philistine army saw their hero was dead, fear overwhelmed them. They turned and fled, with the Israelite army pursuing, shouting in victory. This wasn't just a military victory, it was a spiritual one. David had proven that with faith in God, no enemy is too large, no challenge too difficult. In our lives, we often face our own Goliaths, challenges that seem too great to overcome. It might be a frightening medical diagnosis, a financial crisis, a broken relationship, or a deep fear holding us back. But David's story teaches us that how we view our challenges will determine how we face them. When we look at our Goliaths through the lens of fear, they become insurmountable. But when we view them through the lens of faith, they are just defeated enemies. In your life, what Goliaths are you facing? And more importantly, through which lens are you viewing them? Remember, sometimes just one stone, one small act of faith is enough to defeat your greatest enemy. Because ultimately, victory doesn't depend on our strength, but on the one we trust. And when we place our faith in him, no Goliath can stand against us. When Goliath fell, a moment of silence enveloped the entire valley of Elah. No one could believe what had just happened. The Philistine giant, who had made the entire Israelite army tremble for 40 days, now lay motionless on the ground, defeated by a shepherd boy with a single stone. David wasted no time in his victory. With determination and courage, he ran to Goliath, drew the giant's own sword from its sheath, and cut off his head, fulfilling his promise and proving that the victory was complete. This wasn't just a brutal act, it was a powerful statement about the finality of the victory, an undeniable proof that the enemy had truly been defeated. When the Philistine army saw their champion was dead, fear overwhelmed them. The warriors who had once been proud and confident now turned and fled, with the Israelite army pursuing after them, shouting in victory. A single moment had changed the course of the entire battle. One courageous act had transformed what seemed like certain defeat into glorious victory. When David returned to camp, holding Goliath's head, he was welcomed as a hero. King Saul, who had previously doubted his ability, now looked at him with surprise and respect. "Whose son are you, young man?" Saul asked, not recognizing the shepherd boy he had met earlier. "I am the son of your servant Jesse of Bethlehem," David replied, humble in his victory. The reaction of people to David's victory is a lesson about how the world often judges success. Before facing Goliath, David was just an unknown shepherd boy. After his victory, he became a national hero. Women sang his praises in songs. Saul has slain his thousands, but David his tens of thousands. David's fame spread throughout Israel. But this victory didn't just bring glory, it also brought new challenges. David's sudden fame made King Saul jealous and fearful. He began to see David not as a hero, but as a threat to his throne. From that day forward, Saul sought to kill David, forcing him to flee and live the life of a fugitive for many years. This is a profound paradox. David's greatest victory also opened a chapter of trials in his life. But it was during these difficult years that David's character was refined, his faith strengthened, and he was prepared for the crown he would eventually wear, not as the conqueror of Goliath, but as the king of Israel. David's victory over Goliath had profound historical significance for the nation of Israel. It wasn't just a military victory, it was a demonstration of the power of faith in God. It reminded the Israelites that they were not alone in their battles, that their God was stronger than any enemy they might face. This story also marks the beginning of a new era in Israel's history. David, who would later become Israel's greatest king, began his journey not in a palace or on a battlefield, but in a valley, facing a giant that no one else dared to confront. From that moment, David's destiny and Israel's destiny became intertwined. In our own lives, we also have Goliath moments, defining moments when we face challenges that seem impossible to overcome. How we respond to these moments can shape our entire journey. Like David, our victories over the Goliaths in our lives don't just bring immediate joy, they can open new chapters, full of both challenges and opportunities. Victory often brings attention, and attention can bring both opportunity and jealousy. But if we maintain our faith as David did, we'll find that each challenge is just a step in the journey that God has planned for us. Remember that true victory isn't about defeating enemies, it's about fulfilling God's purpose in our lives. David didn't just defeat Goliath to prove his strength, he did it to demonstrate God's power. And that's the most important lesson from this story. When we place our faith in God, when we fight for His name rather than for our own glory, we'll find that no Goliath is too big to defeat. And more importantly, what are you fighting for? Remember, like David, your victory isn't just about the present moment, it's about the journey ahead, about the purpose God has for your life. And when you walk in that faith, you'll find that every challenge, every Goliath, is just an opportunity to demonstrate God's power in your life. The story of David and Goliath is not just an ancient page of history or a simple heroic tale. It is a treasure trove containing timeless lessons, profound principles that can be applied to our modern lives. Let's explore these valuable lessons and how they can transform the way we face the Goliaths in our daily lives. First, we need to identify our own Goliaths. In the modern world, these giants may not be 9 feet tall or wear bronze armor, but they are no less intimidating. Perhaps it's a frightening medical diagnosis when the doctor says cancer or terminal illness, and you feel as if the ground beneath your feet is collapsing. It might be a financial crisis when debts pile up and you see no way out. Or perhaps it's the pain of a broken relationship, the betrayal of someone you trusted, or workplace pressure that seems insurmountable. Like Goliath, these modern challenges often use fear as their primary weapon. They stand before us each day, challenging us, making us tremble, and causing us to feel powerless. They want us to believe they are too big, too powerful to defeat. The first lesson from David's story is, how we view our challenges will determine how we respond to them. When the Israelite army looked at Goliath, they only saw an unbeatable giant. But when David looked at the same Goliath, he saw an enemy of God, one who would soon fall. This wasn't naivety, it was faith. Faith that with God, nothing is impossible. In your life, through which lens are you viewing your challenges? The lens of fear or the lens of faith? When you face a medical diagnosis, do you only see illness, or do you see an opportunity to witness God's healing power? When you face financial crisis, do you only see debt, or do you see an opportunity to witness God's provision? How you see will shape how you respond. The second lesson from David's story is about the power of faith. Faith is not a vague emotion. It's a solid belief in one greater than any challenge. David didn't just believe he could defeat Goliath. He believed God would defeat Goliath through him. This is an important distinction. In the modern world, we often try to face challenges with our own strength. We rely on our intelligence, talents, experience, and resources. But when challenges become too great, these tools often prove insufficient. That's when we need to remember the lesson from David. True faith isn't about believing in yourself, but in one greater than yourself. Think about a challenge you're facing right now. How have you tried to deal with it using your own strength? And what might change if you began to view it through the lens of faith? Faith that God is greater than your challenge, that He can and will help you overcome it. The third lesson from David's story is about using your 5 stones. David didn't try to become a conventional warrior. He didn't use Saul's armor or fight in the way people expected. Instead, he used the tools God had prepared for him, his sling and stones, skills he had developed during his years as a shepherd. In your life, what are your 5 stones? These are your talents, skills, experiences, and strengths that God has given you. These are the tools that God has prepared for you to face the challenges in your life. Too often, we try to face challenges by imitating others. We try to wear Saul's armor, using methods, strategies, and approaches of others. But the lesson from David is, you must be true to who you are and how God has equipped you. Take time to identify your 5 stones. They might be your ability to listen, patience, creativity, problem-solving skills, or a compassionate heart. They might be experiences you've had, lessons you've learned through past trials. Recognize that God has prepared you in His own way, and your unique strengths are the tools He will use to help you defeat the Goliaths in your life. The fourth lesson from David's story is about standing firm against mockery and doubt. When David declared he would face Goliath, he had to face mockery from his brother, doubt from King Saul, and contempt from Goliath himself. But he didn't let these negative opinions discourage him. In modern life, when you decide to face your Goliaths, you may also face mockery and doubt from others. It might be colleagues who don't believe you can complete a difficult project. It might be friends or family who don't understand why you're choosing a difficult path. Or it might be the voice in your head constantly whispering that you're not good enough, not strong enough, not smart enough to overcome the challenge. The lesson from David is, don't let these negative opinions shape your faith. Hold firm to your faith in God and the purpose He has placed in your heart. Focus on your goal, not on the noise around you. Remember that David's critics, including his brother and King Saul, were all wrong. They couldn't see what David saw, couldn't understand what David understood. And likewise, your critics may not see what God is doing in your life. Don't let their criticism discourage you. Finally, the fifth lesson from David's story is about true victory. David's victory over Goliath wasn't just a personal victory. It was a victory for the entire nation of Israel. It didn't just liberate David, it liberated an entire people from fear and threat. In your life, when you face and defeat your Goliaths, your victory isn't just for yourself. It can inspire and encourage those around you. Your victory can show them that with faith in God, no challenge is too great to overcome. Think about this. Your victory over illness can bring hope to others facing the same diagnosis. Your victory over financial crisis can show the way for others struggling with debt. Your victory over the pain of a broken relationship can bring healing to others experiencing the same pain. This is why your story matters. This is why your victory matters. Because like David, your victory isn't just about you. It's about showing the world that God is still at work, that He's still helping those who trust Him defeat the Goliaths in their lives. So what is your Goliath? And more importantly, how will you face it? Will you cower in fear like the Israelite army? Or will you step forward with faith like David? Will you try to wear Saul's armor? Or will you use the 5 stones God has prepared for you? Remember, with God by your side, no Goliath is too big to defeat. And when you face your challenges with faith and courage, you not only change your life, you can also change the lives of those around you. Our journey through the story of David and Goliath has taken us from the ancient valley of Elah to the modern challenges each of us must face. We have witnessed a shepherd boy standing before a giant, not with his own strength, but with faith in one greater than any challenge. And in this story we have found timeless lessons about faith, courage and victory. Looking back at this story, we see that David didn't just defeat an enemy, he changed how an entire nation viewed themselves. Before David stepped into the valley, the Israelite army was paralyzed by fear. They had defined themselves through the lens of helplessness. But after David's victory, they saw themselves as warriors, as victors, as God's chosen people. This is the power of an example. When one person stands up with faith, they don't just change their own life. They change how those around them see the world. They open new possibilities, not just for themselves, but for all who witness their actions. In your life, you may not face a 9-foot giant with bronze armor and an iron spear, but you have your own Goliaths, challenges that seem too great, too powerful to overcome. Perhaps it's a frightening medical diagnosis, a financial crisis, a broken relationship, or a deep fear holding you back. But the lesson from David is, how you view your challenge will determine how you face it. When you look at your Goliaths through the lens of fear, they become insurmountable. But when you view them through the lens of faith, they are just defeated enemies. Remember, David didn't face Goliath alone. He came in the name of the Lord of hosts. And you too, you are not alone in your battle. You have one greater than any challenge standing beside you. And with Him, nothing is impossible. When you face your Goliaths in life, remember these lessons from this story. First, be true to who you are and how God has equipped you. Don't try to wear Saul's armor. Don't try to be someone else or use others' methods. Use your 5 stones, your unique strengths, skills and talents that God has prepared for you. Second, remember that every trial in your past was preparation for future challenges. David had defeated lions and bears before facing Goliath. Small victories build faith for greater challenges. Third, don't let others' negative opinions discourage you. David had to face mockery from his brother, doubt from King Saul, and contempt from Goliath himself. But he didn't let these opinions shape his faith. Fourth, remember that your victory isn't just for yourself. David's victory over Goliath didn't just free David, it freed an entire nation from fear and threat. When you defeat your Goliaths, you not only change your life, you also inspire and encourage those around you. And finally, remember that true victory isn't about defeating enemies, it's about fulfilling God's purpose in your life. David didn't just defeat Goliath to prove his strength, he did it to demonstrate God's power. And that's the most important lesson from this story. When we place our faith in God, when we fight for His name rather than for our own glory, we'll find that no Goliath is too big to defeat. How will you face it? Will you cower in fear like the Israelite army, or will you step forward with faith like David? Will you try to wear Saul's armor, or will you use the 5 stones God has prepared for you? Remember, with God by your side, no Goliath is too big to defeat. And when you face your challenges with faith and courage, you not only change your life, you can also change the lives of those around you. The story of David and Goliath isn't just a story about the past. It's an invitation for the present. An invitation to live with faith, to face our challenges not with fear but with confidence that God is beside us. An invitation to remember that sometimes just one stone, one small act of faith, is enough to defeat our greatest enemy. So step forward with faith, with courage, and with confidence that God is beside you. Face your Goliaths, not with fear but with faith, that with God, all things are possible. And when you do, you'll find that, like David, you can defeat the giants in your life and step into the destiny God has prepared for you. God bless you.